For years, the mainstream view was simple. America could still design advanced technology, still fund giant projects, still dream big. But building the impossible at home was another story. The accepted belief was that the hard part, the physical part, the factory part, had slipped away. The machines were elsewhere, the supply chains were elsewhere, the speed was elsewhere, the confidence was elsewhere. Then something changed. Washington put real money on the table. Builders, engineers, and federal agencies began pushing projects that were supposed to be too large, too slow, too expensive, or too outdated to happen here. And across the country, a different kind of message started to take shape. The United States was not giving up on making hard things again. It was trying to prove that scale, speed, and modern engineering could still live on American soil. By the end of this video, you'll know why this works and how to apply it with what you already have. That line sounds strange here because this is not about fixing a house or turning on a cooling system. It is about rebuilding the national ability to build. Roads, rail, energy, factories, charging networks, and modern construction systems. The core idea is the same. A system fails when people stop maintaining the parts that make it run. A system comes back when money, labor, machines, and planning all return at the same time. The consensus before this push was bleak. Critics said American infrastructure was old, slow, and buried under delay. New large projects were treated like warnings instead of proof. People pointed to Asia and Europe for speed. They pointed to the United States for paperwork. That became the common story. The counterattack began in March of 2021. President Joe Biden proposed the American Jobs Plan. In his words, "We have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to build a better America, a nation built on the foundation of modern infrastructure." That was the sales pitch. The harder question came right after. Could the country actually do it? In November of 2021, the bipartisan infrastructure bill became law. According to the White House fact sheet, it included $1.2 trillion for infrastructure improvements, with $550 billion in new spending over 5 years for transportation, broadband, water, and energy projects. Those are not abstract promises. Those are the numbers that turned a slogan into procurement, contracts, engineering reviews, and concrete. That money mattered because the problem was not only ambition, it was age. The research behind this story points to long-running complaints about outdated practices and protocols. The challenge was not just to repair old systems, it was to build with newer methods that cut time and labor. That is where modern construction started to matter. Some projects are now using 3D printing and modular construction. Those methods do something very simple. They move work off the open site and into controlled production, where pieces can be built faster, repeated more easily, and assembled with less waste. That is one reason this moment matters. The story is not only about spending more, it is about building differently. The companies around this effort show how broad the bet really is. Bechtel Corporation brings large-scale engineering, construction, and project management. Tesla is tied to sustainable energy and electric vehicles. Boston Dynamics is known for robotics and automation, which matters when labor is tight and building speed matters. These are not random names. They show that the push is not about one highway or one bridge. It is about merging heavy construction with newer tools. The federal side matters too. The U.S. Department of Transportation has a direct role in transportation policy and funding. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory focuses on renewable energy research. When those pieces line up, the result is not just a project list. It becomes a national test of whether public money and private engineering can move together at scale. The public wanted movement. A 2022 Pew Research survey found that 73% of Americans viewed improving infrastructure as a government priority. That figure matters because it cuts through the idea that these projects were niche or elite. The demand was broad. People understood the daily version of infrastructure decline. Slower trips. Older systems. Missed upgrades. Weak links that only get noticed when they fail. Transportation became one of the clearest battlegrounds. In August of 2022, The U.S. Department of Transportation announced major funding for high-speed rail projects aimed at reducing travel times between cities. The vision was bold. Various proposals aimed for systems that could connect major cities at speeds above 200 miles per hour. Estimated project costs ranged from $68 billion to more than $100 billion. That kind of number is exactly why many people called it impossible. Not because fast rail is fantasy, but because the United States has a record of talking about speed and then sinking into years of study, delay, and local fights. The mainstream view said America had lost the muscle memory for projects like this. But there is another perspective in the research. As of 2024, many states had already begun high-speed rail studies and planning phases. That does not mean the whole system is finished. It means the old pattern of total inaction is not the whole truth anymore. Planning is not the same as steel in the ground, but it is still movement. The common claim that nothing is happening does not fully match the record. Energy tells the same story from another angle. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, renewable energy sources made up about 21% of total U.S. energy generation as of 2022. The projection in the research points to 50% by 2030. That gap is huge. It means the country is trying to shift almost a third of its generation mix in less than a decade. You cannot do that with speeches alone. You need transmission, generation sites, storage, equipment, labor, and land. In 2023, major renewable energy programs began ramping up, with rising subsidies for solar and wind energy construction across the United States. By 2024, the research reports visible progress on new renewable energy facilities and expansion of electric vehicle charging infrastructure. This is where the story gets more interesting, because the mainstream version says America is bad at building now. The evidence here says the picture is mixed. The country still struggles with delay and cost. That part is real. Critics warn that these giant projects may raise national debt, and some economists question whether long-run gains will outweigh the initial financial burden. Those concerns are not minor. When project totals reach $1.2 trillion, scrutiny is expected. There is also an environmental challenge inside projects built in the name of cleaner energy. The research notes concerns about mining for materials needed for solar panels and wind turbines. That has sparked activism and debate. So the story is not simple progress against simple failure. It is force meeting friction at every stage. Still, the impossible part was never that America lacked money. The impossible part was coordination. Could agencies approve projects fast enough? Could builders scale up? Could the workforce adapt? Could supply chains handle demand? Could the country shift from talking about renewal to physically laying it down? Modern methods suggest one answer. 3D printing can reduce labor on parts that are repetitive and time-heavy. Modular construction can shorten schedules by making large sections in advance. Automation tools from companies such as Boston Dynamics point toward work sites where robots and people share jobs that are dirty, dangerous, or slow when done only by hand. That does not erase the labor challenge. It changes the shape of it. This matters because labor is often the hidden limit in giant build-outs. Money can authorize a project. It cannot by itself create enough trained people at the exact moment demand spikes. New tools become a way to stretch the workforce that exists. The best way to understand this push is not as one project, but as an effort to rebuild a full industrial chain. Transportation, energy, digital access, water systems, and charging networks all pull on each other. Broadband matters for industry. Roads matter for delivery. Energy matters for charging and manufacturing. Water matters for both people and plants. Once you see the chain, the scale of the bet becomes clear. That is why the phrase impossible keeps coming back. It was not only about engineering, it was about whether the United States could still organize itself to build in the real world, under modern rules, with modern costs, and still finish. And that is where the common belief deserves a challenge. The popular claim says America cannot build anymore. The evidence in this research says that claim goes too far. The bipartisan infrastructure law alone set $550 billion in new spending over 5 years. The Department of Transportation moved funding toward high-speed rail in August of 2022. Renewable energy programs accelerated in 2023. By 2024, charging networks and renewable facilities were already showing progress. Those are not signs of a country doing nothing. A better reading is harsher and more honest. America can still build, but only when it treats the effort like a national priority and backs it with giant sums, federal coordination, and newer building methods. That is a much narrower victory than the old image of effortless industrial power. It is still a victory. There is also a deeper lesson here about financial power versus physics. Money can shorten delays, hire firms, and place orders. It cannot cancel distance, materials, weather, land fights, or the need for human skill. Every major project becomes a test between funding and the stubborn reality of the physical world. The projects moving now are proof that money alone is not enough, but money plus persistence can still shift what people think is possible. Look at the range again. $1.2 trillion authorized, $550 billion in new spending over 5 years, high-speed rail concepts above 200 miles per hour, cost ranges from $68 billion to over $100 billion, renewable energy at 21% of total generation in 2022, projected to reach 50% by 2030. 73% of Americans saying infrastructure improvement should be a priority in the 2022 Pew Research Survey. Those numbers show scale, urgency, and public demand all at once. The machinery behind those numbers is not glamorous. It is planning, site work, environmental review, grid links, procurement, concrete pours, modular assembly, utility connections, and endless scheduling. That is exactly why this story matters. The impossible was never impossible because nobody could imagine it. It was called impossible because it required thousands of ordinary hard steps in the right order. As of 2024, that process is still unfinished. The research does not claim total success. It claims progress. New renewable energy facilities are being built. Electric vehicle charging infrastructure is expanding. States are in rail study and planning phases. The effort is alive, visible, and expensive. So what did America just build that everyone said was impossible? Not one bridge, not one train, not one wind farm. It built momentum. After years of decline talk, after years of hearing that large American projects were too slow to matter, the country assembled a real pipeline of infrastructure work backed by federal law, federal money, private contractors, and newer construction systems. That is the change. The impossible thing was not a single object. It was the return of organized national building at scale. And there is a final tension inside that achievement. Momentum can be lost. Debt concerns can grow. Material supply can tighten. Environmental fights can slow projects. Planning can stall before construction. Public support can fade if results come too slowly. Every giant effort carries those risks from day one. But the old consensus has already taken a hit. The idea that nothing can be built here anymore is weaker now than it was before March of 2021. Before November of 2021. Before the Department of Transportation moved funding in August of 2022. Before renewable programs accelerated in 2023. Before 2024 began showing visible progress across charging and energy projects. That shift matters. Nations are shaped by what they believe they can still make. For a long time, the American answer sounded defensive. Design here. Build somewhere else. Talk big. Deliver slowly. The projects in this research do not erase that history. They do show a country trying to write a different one. A country where Bechtel-scale construction, Tesla-linked energy build-out, Boston Dynamics-style automation, Department of Transportation funding, and National Renewable Energy Laboratory research all point in one direction. Build faster, build cleaner, build larger, build at home. That is the real story, not magic, not easy victory, not a perfect comeback. A country that many people thought had forgotten how to build at scale is trying to teach itself again with $1.2 trillion, $550 billion in new spending, renewable targets that reach from 21% toward 50%, rail visions above 200 miles per hour, and a public that said by 73% that fixing infrastructure should be a priority. Everyone said that kind of coordinated push was beyond reach. Too messy. Too late. Too expensive. Too American, in the worst sense of the word. Now the machines are moving, the money is committed, and the work is real.